Hey, all, I'm Dan. He's Ed. And on today's episode from Beyond the Flame, we are talking all about self service. Perfect. Yes. So self serve, no wait is required. Of course, we have to be on brand for the whole barbecue and beyond the flame.
Got the barbecue. Dan's got the workflow mojo. So
Exactly. Perfect. Okay. So, Ed, I'm going to start it nice and easy. What to you is self service?
so self-service is the ability to have your customers enable themselves to facilitate answers to their issues or problems, hopefully without having to open up a ticket and consume more resources from a company's support staff. So yeah, so how can we enable the users to help themselves with any sort of issues that they have?
Yeah. Perfect. One of the things that I often hear people mention, I don't know how much they really know about like that whole shift left mentality. Let's not escalate all the way up the tree if we don't need to. How much more can we kind of constantly pass down that tree? What education can we go from L3 to L2? And eventually you get to L1, but you don't want them to still raise that ticket. So they're constantly shifting left, and can you move more and more over to where your customers can just handle it themselves?
Yeah, and it is a mentality thing. I think sometimes we get so conditioned to, hey, open a ticket, go open a ticket, go open a ticket, instead of stopping for a second and saying, I can't open the ticket, but let me go see if there's anything that I can do myself to fix the issue before I have to open a ticket. Because if I open a ticket, then that's going to take some time for whoever the service agent is to acknowledge it. Obviously, we can get automation involved in there as well, but it's still going to take some time. Can I solve my problem quicker by myself? And that's kind of the mentality that I think organizations need to start helping get into that process a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I think it's a massive cultural shift, as you said, right? It's not something that you're also going to change overnight. You can't just say, right, okay, we're shifting left. Stop raising tickets, right? It just doesn't work like that, does it? I think we've both seen over the years that you can have the best laid plans, but it doesn't always mean that that's what's going to come out. But there are definite things that we can do to make that journey a little bit easier. What have you seen of really good examples for that?
Yeah. So I think one of the best examples is, you have an internally created knowledge base that you have, that you can have most of your common issues, processes documented within a knowledge base, and you can actually hook that knowledge base up to your service management support portal. So perhaps you have a section that's really easily identifiable on your service portal that says, hey, let's look here first for an answer. Type in your question, see if we have an answer that's already there, and then that will go back and link to your knowledge base articles and hopefully have something that comes up and can solve your issue.
Yeah. The one thing that I always really don't like about knowledge bases, I would say, to be honest, I actually think this counts from both being a customer and being the agent, but it's stale, out-of-date information.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right? Because there is nothing worse than seeing an article, and I know that you literally said this like 5 minutes ago before we started the recording, but there is nothing worse than when you think you found the problem, but the screenshots are from like an old UI, the information, like the buttons that they tell you to click no longer exist. Like it is the most frustrating thing you can do.
I know everyone's done this before. So everyone has been, and not necessarily in the context of a knowledge base, but using the internet as the biggest knowledge base, has gone in to look up a issue for some kind of application issue, an error, and you look into it and you see an article from Stack Overflow, and you're like, cool, I got that. But then you go in and you see like, oh man, it's from like 2015, years ago, and you're like, this is not going to apply, is it, kind of thing. So same thing with internal knowledge bases. You don't want to go to an article was written 5 years ago and maybe a little out of date.
Yeah, it's really good. You don't want to do that. There are obvious things that we can always do to make sure that that isn't going to be the case, personally, my own experience is some of our some of the companies I worked for made their agents check it annually.
Yeah.
Audit
it.
Do that audit. And as you said, you'll be able to go, right, okay, for this month's part of the audit, we'll tackle like system preferences. And then next month's we'll target the UI. And you just have to constantly make sure that your articles are up to date.
Yep.
Even from the customer's perspective, there is nothing that looks worse on the company than having bad articles. But from the agent's perspective, there is nothing more frustrating of providing an article to a customer and it being wrong or being unusable, and they just bat the ticket back, and then you have to go and find the next thing.
Yeah. What's even worse is if you provide that article or that link to that article as a self-service action, and the customer or user goes to that, and the page doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, yeah.
We've all done that. We've all hit that, and you're like, "Are you kidding me?" That's why you want to have that audit of your knowledge bases to make sure, first of all, is the content up to date, and then make sure that it's actually there. So when we serve it up, the customers can consume it and hopefully resolve their issues.
Yeah, I mean, the most mature. This is a slight tangent, but the most mature company that I have ever seen in terms of handle this, which is every time that their product did a release, as part of that release, their development team had already identified all of the knowledge base articles that needed to be updated.
Nice.
Right. So that meant that their level 3 engineers would then, as part of doing that, going through that release and doing the kind of the actual push, would have checked and gone, okay, yes, this one did, and it could be something simple as, right, let's just update a screenshot. Or actually, it could be an entire article rewrite. But it was the L3 engineers that then did that. That then went down, and they even did education sessions. So every Thursday, they ran a 1-hour education session. It was a full-on ceremony. And they would do that handover of information, because the more they could shift left, the easier it was. And it meant so much to them.
So that is a great example of proactive processes of improving your knowledge bases, instead of being reactive of, hey, release this new functionality, we got to go back and update the documentation, you know, and then, hopefully that happens. But a lot of times, sometimes people get busy, they forget.
Yeah.
So having that proactive approach of making it part of that process of the release, that's awesome. That kind of makes sure that you cover your bases, and then also get the information out to everyone else that needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a company that I think has probably failed at every single part of that journey, and gone, I don't want to do this anymore. But honestly, it was a lovely thing to work with, because it meant that when I was being a service agent, I knew that my documentation was up to date. I've had the education classes, I've seen the changes, and I've felt that experience. So it was really nice to do.
And you know what? As small as that seems, that can have a compounding effect on your customer satisfaction.
Oh yeah.
Excellent. And internal users or external users, small stuff like that can have a compounding effect of, man, that was awesome. I got my answer. It was up to date. Great. 5-star kind of thing. And so, that all that adds up.
Oh, it does. And it does. But to your point of 5-star, we may not even see the 5-star, because actually, again, when you start shifting left, you're seeing this whole ticket deflection, right? And actually, I actually had this argument, heated discussion. I'll call it a heated discussion. It wasn't an argument, with one of my very old customers, which was, but if I shift left, I will have to fire employees because they won't have work to do. No. They will have more meaningful work to do and less busy work. And that is exactly what you want your agents to be focusing on, is the harder things that you can't, or you don't have the processes to handle yet. So that was a good heated discussion, put it that way.
Awesome. So we talked about knowledge bases and keeping them up to date as far as self-service. So I'm going to throw out there one of the biggest examples of a self-service from a company that obviously we work with a lot. So Atlassian Community. So that is probably the gold star of self-service. Literally a whole community has been built around being able to go and ask your questions. So I think that was brilliant on Atlassian's perspective to build their community around that and then expand it. So you literally have so much self-service information there that by the time you get to having to open a ticket, hopefully it's something that, is a big issue kind of thing.
Both you and I have been admins in our previous lives.
Yep.
How often would you go to the community first?
Oh God, I lived there.
Yeah.
Literally.
Right? Yeah. You have to, because I don't want to raise a ticket to Atlassian to wait time for support, unless you're an enterprise, right? You got some decent SLAs. But yeah, I mean, it's really important to be able to do that self-service and push some of that information, down the line and be able to have that self-service. So yeah, I really love that example.
And all the big companies, all the big SaaS companies now, the Salesforce, everything, Atlassian, they're all making sure to build out their communities because of that, because they want to have a nice set of a user base that can help each other, whether it's with issues or problems or use cases or scenarios, anything from that perspective they can go to and quickly get that information. It makes it's infinitely less expensive for a company to be able to nurture a community than have to spend resources on having a service department.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. The one bugbear I have about the community, and we've crossed in that line already, is about the audit, is actually information can get a bit out of date.
Yep.
So I got this is kind of a two-parter. Whose responsibility is it to create, and who's responsible for auditing?
So the whole purpose of the community is that the whole user-generated content. So user-generated content, being able to answer your questions. And then what I've noticed within the community as well is that there is some self-monitoring on as far as, hey, this answer is correct, this answer is not correct, being very cordial about disagreements kind of thing. So I think at a high level, the SaaS company in charge wants to make sure that is everyone being respectful, we're having conversations, no one's going off the rails, and trying to take over and be a salesperson or anything like that. But internally, I think the community members do a great job of, kind of maintain the status quo, make sure everything is, being appropriate, and then escalate if there's any kind of issues to.
Yeah, the powers that be. I mean, big shout out to our online community leaders. They do a fantastic job.
Yeah, they put up with us. So
yeah, they definitely do. I think it's really important. Like, if when we kind of take a step back and we kind of think about like maybe some of our own customer experience, our own end experience, or kind of where we've been helping our own customers. The common question is, okay, but I'm just a service agent. Why is it my responsibility to create documentation? Why is it my responsibility to audit? So I know that is definitely one of the hardest conversations that you have to kind of work with. So, like, what have you done to kind of combat that and find them moving to, like you said, more of a proactive measure rather than reactive?
Yeah. So when you're a service agent, you're like that. You're that interaction with the company and the user or the customer. You're that first line of defense. It's kind of like, when you call the phone company because you have a problem, the service agent's just the messenger. They're trying to help you out, but they can only do so much, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, but within our context, it's like, okay, the cool thing is that we can immediately spin up a knowledge-based article based off of a specific ticket. So that service desk agent can say, hey, I had this really cool use case, or this customer had this specific amount of feedback on an issue. I could literally take all that information that I've recorded in my ticket and then say, push a button and say, here's now a new knowledge-based article that we have about that. So you're kind of building out the self-service catalog as a service agent and contributing to that. So I kind of try to help make sure that they're understand that they are, a super important part of the whole service management process.
Yeah, I think it is important, and the way I've always tried to look at this challenge is actually everyone it's like so many things in life, right? We are all part of the problem, and therefore we are all part of the solution. The more we rely and say, not my job, right? You're not helping resolve this for your future self, the future other yous, and that's it's not the world that I definitely want to be in or work of. And I was quite lucky that the mentors that I had would drive into me, which is, if you have seen this problem before and you saw it once, okay, it might have been an anomaly. If you have seen it again and then you still don't have a knowledge base article, that's now repeated.
Yep.
It is now your responsibility to take that information and create an article. Like you said, it could be some companies may have a really great automated process, which we'll come on to, but like that automated thing is a very good mature thing. But even if it is manual, you as a service agent are still responsible to try and create a level of documentation that can be repeated. And it might just be an internal one. That's fine. But at least you have a step-by-step guide of how to get that through the next time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And from an automation perspective, you're going to have certain problems or incidents that are going to be highly repetitive. So Dan forgets his password every week. And so, instead of submitting a ticket to, hey, can you reset my password? The service desk agents now are very familiar with Dan, and they have, knowledge base articles that he can access that actually point him to the documentation that says, hey, here's how you reset your password by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings me on to that perfect thing. When we talk about automation, you might have plenty of really good tools, and like you say, you might have a step-by-step guide that says, right, you go to Google, you click forgot password, you can create your own password, we don't have to do it for you, right? That's a perfect example of self-service. The next one, I think, which is also where I've definitely seen a lot more companies now try and look for, again, as we start talking about the better utilization rather than busy work, is the more meaningful work.
Yes.
Which is where they're starting to say, okay, well, there is no value being added from an engineer or an agent or whatever you might call your service team adding a user to a group, right? Yes, that user now gets access to the things they need, but that agent is not adding value, right? So what can you do to automate? Well, APIs and automation exists. They are certainly my best friend. I know that there are the right times to kind of do that automation, but put that aside, find the opportunities where you can say, well, this is a repeated task, 50, 100, whatever it might be. And then look at it and say, well, if it costs us a week worth of time to build, but now we're going to get 50 weeks back.
Yep.
That's amazing. So
return on investment there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you start thinking about portal views, right?
Yes.
Imagine having a self-serve portal. Any of these requests create, and obviously being part of the kind of Atlassian ecosystem, create Jira projects, create Confluence spaces, get added to groups so that you can see permissions, be able to, create custom fields or whatever it might be. Like, there are so many additional things where we can now, from an admin perspective as well, I can now gain back time because, again, I'm not doing busy work.
Yeah.
I am now able to make more meaningful impact to the other things. Maybe if you're on DC, think about performance metrics. Is my instance healthy?
Yes.
If you're on cloud, are you looking to introduce new functionality, but actually you can't because you're spending your time doing busy work? How can you kind of offload that? I think that's a really good thing.
Really good. And like you said, on the portal views, the key to the portal views is, don't make them overly complicated. So that users, just sit there and look and be like, I don't know where to go now. So, just make it super easy for the users and consumers to use. Design that process from your portal view, get the knowledge base article in there, have a little help text that says, hey, type in your question here and articles will pop up, and hopefully those will be able to resolve your issue, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think they're all really, really valid. We have to find, the whole point is, and you touched on this earlier about the satisfaction, actually, and I'll circle it back slightly, which is we've also seen companies move more away from this whole CSAT score to more of like the experience level agreements, right?
Correct.
From the SLA to the XLA. And I know CSAT scores come part of that, but the whole experience, how easy was it for you to look the ticket? How easy was it for you to get resolved? What was the time it got resolved? There are so many elements to it. How nice the agent was and how did they make you feel. But self-service can massively improve, if done well, can massively improve your XLAs.
I'm gonna give myself a 5-star review once if I use self-service and I figure my own thing out, I'm gonna be like 5 stars, baby. I did it.
Yeah. It makes you feel good though, doesn't it?
It does. It's like, all right, I figured it out. I got my own answer, so I can continue on with my day.
Amazing. I got one last thing, and it's because of the world that we live in, and I know everyone's going to hate this, but AI, right? How do you genuinely think AI is going to now affect self-serve?
So I think it's going to make things efficient. I think it'll be able to pull in, like we said, with the automated piece, with the requests that are I guess asked over and over, the repetitive ones, we can easily get those knocked out with AI. I don't know if it's going to be able to fully take on everything, because there's still some nuances that you need, from a human perspective of, I as a human, as a service desk agent, need to interpolate or, how this person is asking this question, kind of thing. But I think from, hey, self-service, I think it could do a pretty good job of saying, based on your questions, here's the answer, or here are some follow-up answers as well, kind of thing. Yeah. So I think it will be pretty good efficiencies gained within it, but I don't think it's going to be able to go all the way, at least my thought.
I think that the trouble is, and I certainly know, shout out to Daryl Lee, one of our fellow community leaders on this one, but he is not the biggest fan of ChatGPT when it comes to dealing with Atlassian, and I think the trouble is it's the learning model.
Daryl's not the fan of most things. Come on, let's be honest.
No. But I think it's I think it comes back to the knowledge it's got, right? If you're training on stale knowledge, you're going to get a stale answer. So it's really like the whole knowledge-based aspect, the whole, ease of finding information and stuff like that. They're all really, really key points to making sure whatever you do, whether it's automation or you go full AI, right? There's really, really key to make sure that you have a really good, solid foundation.
Yeah, totally agree. And maybe some instances where it can be brought in to help do some of that auditing of your knowledge bases as well. Have AI go through and compare articles, or do a comparison of topics to make sure that you've covered everything. There's all kinds of things.
That's a really good shout, though. It's like, how do you find missing topics? How do you check the topic map? Do you label topics? Like, there are so many nuances that you could do, and that's a really good shout. Actually, it's just, again, audit. Have you even looked at your articles to see what covered?
Yeah. So again, when it comes down to it, AI is just going to be another tool. It's a tool in the toolbox that can help us do our jobs efficiently and hopefully, better.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I don't think there's anything more that I've got on this topic. I think we've chatted for about 20 minutes.
Yeah. And as always, it's awesome because we get to talk about cool stuff and hang out, man. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for being part of today's episode. Again, we were chatting all about the self-serve. No waiters required, because we got to be on that theme. But until next time, have an awesome day.
Awesome.